Japan is a fascinating country where ancient traditions coexist with modernity. But behind this unique mix, there are urban legends so terrifying that they make anyone think twice before visiting certain places or hearing certain stories. In this video, we have reached part 5 of the most chilling Japanese urban legends, those that not only test courage, but leave a lasting mark on the minds of those who know them. And we won't stop there. We will also talk about new legends, stories so disturbing that almost no one has had the courage to tell them until now. These legends are not just the tales you've heard before. They are stories that in some way connect with the deepest fear we all feel. That fear that arises when something doesn't seem right, when you feel like you're being watched, or when a familiar place suddenly becomes sinister. And the scariest thing is that these stories are passed down from generation to generation, always with a touch of truth that makes you question what is real and what is not. So put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and get under your blanket. Let's begin. Okikus Doll. The legend of Okiku begins seemingly innocently, but soon turns into one of the most terrifying horror stories Japan has ever known. Okiku was a young girl who adored her doll, a toy dressed in a traditional kimono. She never parted with this doll, as if the doll were a part of her. But everything changed when Okiku tragically passed away, leaving the doll behind. What was once a simple object of affection became the center of one of the most sinister urban legends, surrounded by fear and mystery. After Okiku's death, the doll was taken to the Manenji Temple, where it remains to this day. It was then that something inexplicable began to happen. The doll's hair, which was once short, began to grow. Scientists who examined the hair discovered that it is, in fact, human hair, possibly from Okiku. Imagine the scene, an inanimate toy, but its hair grows as if it were alive. This is not just a tale to scare people, but a phenomenon that to this day defies science and instills terror in those who know the story. Witnesses who have visited the temple report an indescribable feeling of fear as they approach the doll. Many say it feels as though they are being watched by something or someone. Some describe a cold presence that chills them to the bone, even on a hot day. The doll doesn't move, but there is something about it that seems to be always alert, as if it's waiting for something or someone. Those who know the legend of Okiku feel a shiver down their spine when they think about what it represents, the thin boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The story of Okiku's doll is not limited to the growth of its hair. There are reports of people who dared to touch the doll and then faced inexplicable disasters in their lives. Could it be a coincidence or a curse? The fear that Okiku's spirit is still connected to the doll is real, and many prefer to keep their distance, respecting what they cannot comprehend. After all, who in their right mind would want to risk the wrath of a spirit? Even the most skeptical feel uneasy when they hear the horror stories associated with the doll. It's not just the story that causes chills, but the fact that it persists, untouched by time, as if it's waiting for the next victim of its curse. How would you feel walking into a place where a simple doll is considered a gateway to the world of the dead? For many, that would be enough to never look at a toy the same way again. It's hard to imagine what goes through the minds of those who choose to visit Manenji Temple, where Okiku's doll is kept. Curiosity is strong, but fear is even stronger. Some people even avoid talking about it, believing that mentioning the doll could attract its attention. It's a disturbing thought, but one that echoes in the minds of those who know the legend. Okiku's doll is more than just a story. It's a symbol of the terror that lives in the shadows of the inexplicable. And so, Okiku's doll continues in its silence, with its hair growing slowly, as a constant reminder that there are things in this world that we simply cannot understand. With every strand that grows, the legend strengthens, and the fear it inspires spreads, leaving everyone who knows it with an unsettling feeling that terror is never far away. And if you think this story is disturbing, wait until you hear the next horror tale, where words can be as deadly as curses. Tominos Hell. Tominos Hell is a poem that carries a terrifying curse, written by Yumta Inuhiko. This poem is part of a 1919 collection and is known for bringing bad luck and misfortune to those who dare to recite it aloud. It's not just a simple horror story, but a terrifying tale that has haunted Japan for decades. They say those who read the poem silently may escape unscathed, but those who dare to utter its words aloud may suffer the most terrible consequences. Imagine the terror of reciting each verse, feeling the weight of a curse that promises to destroy your life. True accounts of people who have read the poem aloud reveal catastrophic events in their lives. Some were victims of bizarre accidents, others fell ill inexplicably, and some met a tragic end. A young man, curious and skeptical, decided to test the legend and read the poem to his friends, laughing at the superstition. Days later, he was in a car accident that nearly cost him his life. Coincidence? Perhaps, but the string of misfortunes following the reading cannot be ignored. Tominos Hell is a clear example of how urban legends can turn fear into a powerful and uncontrollable force. The poem tells the story of Tomino, a young man who descends into hell, facing indescribable suffering and pain. With each line, the poem delves deeper into darkness, as if it drags the reader along with Tomino into the depths of torment. It's as if the words have a life of their own, and the curse is merely a reflection of the suffering described. Some horror experts believe the poem is a way to attract evil spirits, who feed on the fear and pain of those who dare to challenge it. It's as if reading the poem opens a door to the other side, an invitation for something dark to enter your life. The warnings are clear. Never read Tominos Hell aloud. But there are always those who ignore these warnings, driven by curiosity or disbelief. Those who survive the experience often report recurring nightmares, where they find themselves trapped in a dark, oppressive place, unable to escape. It's as if the curse of the poem continues to haunt them even after the last verse. And the scariest thing is that once the curse is awakened, there's no turning back. The fear that something terrible could happen at any moment becomes a constant presence, a shadow that never leaves them. There are many mysteries in the world, but few are as feared as this. The mere mention of the poem sends chills down the spines of those who know the legend. Tominos Hell is not just a horror story. It's proof that words have power, and that fear can be a deadly weapon. And would you have the courage to test this legend? Before you answer, remember that it's not just your life that could be at stake, but the lives of everyone around you. After all, terror knows no bounds, and urban legends have a disturbing way of becoming reality. If the poem is capable of causing so much fear, imagine what other horror stories can do. Japan is a country filled with dark tales, where the supernatural often intertwines with everyday life. And so, the legend of Tomino becomes just a piece of the vast and ominous mosaic of Japanese urban legends. If you think words are harmless, you might want to reconsider, because sometimes the deepest terror is hidden in the simplest things. Hib Bashira. In ancient Japan, urban legends of terror have always held a special place, and Hib Bashira, or human pillars, is one of the most macabre and terrifying. The legend says that to ensure the stability and protection of large structures, the ancient Japanese believed that human sacrifices were necessary. These victims were buried alive in the foundations of bridges, castles, and temples, their spirits destined to protect the buildings. Imagine the feeling of knowing that beneath the ground you walk on, there may be the bones of someone who was sacrificed in the name of superstition and fear. The idea that these tormented souls still haunt the sites of their sacrifices is what gives this legend its power. The horror stories surrounding Hib Bashira are many, and in some parts of Japan, people still avoid certain castles or temples at night. They say that in these places, you can hear the moans of the spirits of those who were buried alive. One of the most famous examples is Matsui Castle, where workers reported strange occurrences during its construction. Tools would disappear, screams were heard coming from deep within the ground, and many believe that everything only stopped when a young woman was sacrificed and buried in the castle's foundations. This story is not just a legend, but a part of folklore that still scares the Japanese to this day. The practice of Hib Bashira was not just a myth, but a terrifying reality that is part of Japan's history. The victims were carefully chosen, often being young and healthy, as it was believed that these sacrifices would ensure the durability of the structures. The terror of being chosen for such a fate was something that people lived with constant fear, especially during large construction projects. The most terrifying thing is to think that for these victims, there was no escape. Once chosen, their fate was sealed. Their spirits, according to the legend, remained trapped in the places where they were sacrificed, seeking revenge or perhaps only the peace that was denied them. There are historical records that mention this practice, which makes the legend of Hib Bashira even more disturbing. Imagine living in a time when superstition was so strong that human lives were traded for the stability of a building. Horror stories passed down through generations speak of buildings that, when demolished or renovated, reveal the bones of the victims still embedded in the foundations. These remains are a silent reminder of the fear that dominated people's lives at that time and the cruelty that superstition can engender. Hib Bashira also connects with other Japanese urban legends, where the supernatural and fear go hand in hand. It is said that the souls of the sacrificed, trapped in the pillars and foundations, are unable to rest and wander the places where their lives were taken, causing misfortunes and disasters to those who dare to disturb them. These stories are often used to explain inexplicable accidents that occur in places with ancient constructions, as if the dead were still trying to communicate their suffering. The terror of Hib Bashira lies in the idea that the past is never truly buried, and the souls of those sacrificed continue to haunt the present. For the bravest, visiting a place where a Hib Bashira occurred is a test of courage, but most prefer to keep their distance. There is something deeply disturbing about the idea that a human sacrifice could ensure the safety of a structure. That is a fear that transcends time, and the legend of Hib Bashira remains alive in Japan's collective memory, a grim reminder of past practices. And as long as this legend remains, it continues to fuel fear and suspense, especially on nights when the winds seem to carry the whispers of those who were buried alive. If you think this story is frightening, prepare yourself for the next horror tale, where a mysterious village defies all the laws of reality, leaving a trail of fear and mystery that persists to this day. Kagomes Mask. In a small village in the mountains of Japan, there is an urban legend of terror that few dare to mention: the legend of Kagomes Mask. It is said that centuries ago, a woman named Kagome was known for her unparalleled beauty, but also for her arrogance and disdain for others. She lived in an isolated mansion, where she would spend hours admiring her own appearance in ornate mirrors. However, this vanity would be her downfall. One night, during a festival, a hooded stranger appeared in the village, offering Kagome a mask, made of an unknown material, with intricate details and a seductive beauty. Believing the mask would only enhance her beauty, Kagome immediately put it on, not knowing that her life was about to turn into a nightmare. As soon as the mask touched her face, Kagome felt intense pain, as if thousands of needles were piercing her skin. Desperately trying to remove it, she discovered, horrified, that the mask had fused with her flesh. The villagers, drawn by Kagome's screams, arrived at the mansion only to find her lying on the floor, her face covered by the mask, now an inseparable part of her being. From that moment on, Kagome was consumed by insane fury. She began to hunt and kill anyone who dared to look at her, believing they were trying to steal her beauty. The legend says that her eyes, visible through the slits in the mask, were empty, as if her soul had been sucked into the cursed mask. Over time, Kagome disappeared from the village, but the horror stories about her presence continued. People who venture into the mountains report seeing a hooded figure wandering in the dark nights, with a mask that seems to glow in the moonlight. Those who cross her path and look directly at the mask are found dead, their faces twisted in expressions of pure horror, as if they had seen something beyond human comprehension. The mask, now imbued with Kagome's soul, is said to be a cursed artifact, carrying with it the curse of its creator, an insatiable thirst for beauty that leads to destruction. The legend of Kagomes Mask has become a warning for those who visit the region. The village elders say that the mask still seeks a new face to fuse with, perpetuating the curse. There are stories of people who, upon finding a mysterious abandoned mask, could not resist the temptation to try it on, only to disappear shortly after, their homes found empty, except for a single broken mirror. These disappearances fuel the fear that Kagome's curse will never be broken, and that her mask will continue to roam in search of new victims. While it's hard to determine what is real and what is mere superstition, the legend of Kagomes Mask remains alive in the memory of the villagers who believe that the curse will never die as long as the mask exists. Some say it was created by a demon, others believe it was a punishment from the gods for Kagome's vanity. But they all agree on one thing: the mask must be avoided at all costs. The terror it brings is not something that can be understood or defeated. It is an eternal curse, destined to consume anyone who falls under its spell. And so, Kagome's Mask joins the pantheon of Japanese urban legends, a horror tale that warns of the dangers of vanity and the excessive desire for beauty. If you ever find yourself in the mountains of Japan and see a hooded figure, think twice before approaching. The mask is still out there, waiting for its next wearer, and what it promises may be more terrifying than any legend you've ever heard. The Curse of Higinbanas Well. In the small village of Nagiso, hidden in the mountains of Japan, there is a story that few dare to tell. It's about Higinbanas Well, a place that locals avoid like the plague. It's not a tourist attraction. It doesn't appear on maps, and the village elders refuse to speak of it. But if you ask someone younger, who has heard the rumors of these urban legends, they'll tell you that the well is cursed, and that those who approach it at night will find the worst, and never be the same again. It is said that a long time ago, a young woman named Aiko lived in the village. She was curious, always exploring the darkest corners of the forest, where few dared to venture. One day, Aiko found the well. Surrounded by red Higinbana flowers, the well emitted a strange feeling, as if the air around it was heavier, filled with something ancient and evil. The elders always warned to avoid that place, saying the flowers only grow where blood has been spilled. But Aiko, stubborn and skeptical, decided to get closer, drawn by the mystery. That night, Aiko didn't return home. Her family, desperate, organized a search, but all they found was one of her hair ribbons lying near the well. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing to indicate what had happened, just a terrifying silence. From that day on, the village changed. Whispers began to spread. Some said they had seen a pale figure by the well, with long black hair, that seemed to float in the air. Others claimed to hear whispers coming from the well at night, calling out Aiko's name, as if she was trying to return from wherever she had been taken. What makes this story even more frightening is that it's not an old tale, but something that still resonates among the village residents. Some believe the well is a gateway to the underworld, where the spirits of those who died tragically wander without rest. They say the Higinbana flowers, which continue to grow around the well, are nourished by the souls trapped below, and that once every generation, the well demands a new sacrifice, luring the curious, the lonely, and the desperate to its edge, where they are swallowed by the void. In recent years, tourists and paranormal investigators have shown up in the village, drawn by the legends, but almost all of them leave faster than they arrived. Those who dared to get close to the well returned with disturbed looks, unable to speak of what they saw. Some were never the same again, tormented by nightmares and visions of something they couldn't describe. There's a case of a photographer who, after taking pictures of the well, began to notice strange shadows in the images, human figures that weren't there when he clicked the shutter. Not long after, He was found dead in his hotel room, with an expression of pure terror on his face. The village's older residents still keep the traditions alive, leaving offerings near the well, in hopes of appeasing the spirits. They say it's better to leave the past buried, and that some doors should never be opened. There's an almost sacred respect for the place, an unspoken understanding that Higinbanas well is not just a story to scare children, but a sinister reality that looms over the village. And for those who still doubt, just one visit to the place. If they have the courage to face what might be waiting in the shadows. And so, the curse of Higinbanas well remains alive, not just as an urban legend, but as a warning to those who think of challenging the unknown. Because in the end, the deepest terror is not in what you can see, but in what you can feel. That chill on the back of your neck, the feeling of being watched, and the paralyzing fear that something is lurking, waiting to pull you into the dark. Shirogane Inn. If you pass by the main street of the old town, you might stumble upon an old run-down building, with dusty windows and doors barely hanging on their frames. Most people don't pay much attention, but the older residents will tell you not to get too close to Shirogane Inn. Not because it's just an abandoned building, but because there's something about that place that gives you goosebumps in a way you can't explain. About 30 years ago, this inn was just another among many. The owner, Akiko Shirogane, was a woman like any other, trying to keep the business afloat. When an epidemic began to sweep through the town, Akiko opened the doors to those who needed a place to stay. But over time, the people who went there started to disappear. No one noticed right away. But after the first disappearances began, the neighbors started to get suspicious. No one left the inn, only entered. That's when they decided to check what was going on. When they entered, they found the guests, all dead. But they weren't just bodies. They were frozen in poses that no one could understand, as if they had died of fright. And the worst part, Akiko's face was among them, but she didn't seem really dead. She seemed frozen, eyes open as if she was trapped in some kind of trance. There was no explanation for that. After that, the inn was closed and left to rot. But the story didn't end there. Those who pass by at night say the place isn't really empty. Lights turn on out of nowhere. Doors slam shut by themselves. And some people who have entered since then came out different. Disoriented, unable to explain what happened inside. Others simply were never seen again. A man who tried to investigate the story, one of those ghost hunters, decided to spend a night inside with cameras and all that equipment. At first, everything was normal, but during the early morning hours, things started to get strange. The cameras recorded weird noises, and on one of them, a shadow appeared that no one knows where it came from. He was found the next day, sitting, paralyzed, unable to speak. He was hospitalized and since then hasn't said a word about what happened. Nowadays, Shirogane Inn is still there, forgotten by most, but not by the old residents. They say it's better to leave the place as it is. After all, what happened there left a mark that doesn't fade. If you ever feel brave enough to take a look, think twice, because sometimes it's better to leave certain doors closed. If you enjoyed this video and want to know more about other terrifying legends, be sure to check out the full playlist, with all the parts of the Japanese urban legends, available in the end card. Each story is more terrifying than the last, and if you have the courage, you'll want to hear them all. But before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. We have many more stories to tell, and you won't want to miss out. And now tell us in the comments, which of these legends left you the most uneasy? Would you have the courage to visit any of these places? We're curious to know how these stories affected you.